Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Vince, and I've been doing admissions since 1989 and college counseling since 1998 in California.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy has a bachelor's degree from the University of Georgia and a master's degree from North Carolina State University. She works in private practice in Raleigh as a mental health therapist. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. This week in the news, Vince and I discussed an article written by three Wall Street Journal writers entitled, "Colleges Spend Like There's No Tomorrow. These places are just devouring money." We have a special treat for you, friends, for a question from a listener, and I'm not even going to preview it here. I'm going to leave you with a tease, but it's something we've never done before for a question from our listener, and I'm very confident that you're going to like it. Our interview is part 2 of 4, my interview with Ron Lieber, the lead money columnist for the New York Times, and we're resuming our conversation about tough talk about paying for college. And for our college spotlight, Linda will discuss her fairly recent visit to Rice University, a school her daughter, who's at the University of Chicago, seriously considered. And Lisa will join Linda for this spotlight. Vince, it's been a couple months, man, because you did a double hitter last time. Remember we banged out 2 episodes at once?
We did. Right before I went to Europe. And of course, the first day, I'm land in Sweden. And I'm like, I didn't know if it was jet lag. I just felt really tired. So I said, before I get on this ship, I'm going to go get a COVID test.
You had it.
I got it, I think, on the flight over.
Wow. Did that pretty much keep you in bed for most of the trip, or were you able to? Because I know when I got it, I was planning on the South Carolina tour, like Clemson and Furman and Wofford and USC. And then I literally would drive to the city and stay in the hotel because I'd prepaid everything and just drive around the campus in my car.
Well, we have a great doctor, and so he prescribed before the trip Paxlovid. So I was able to, and the cruise ships are, well, at least the one we went on, I won't say their name, but they're, they keep themselves at like 85% because they don't want to lose customers. They have staff that get it. So there's, empty room. So,
okay.
So I got on the ship and, started taking it, that morning, and I tested negative by Thursday. I mean, it was wild.
Wow.
So,
did it ruin your whole trip, or was it still a good trip?
It was still a good trip because, there's no better way to, I would do something for a short time and then rest and sleep. So it turned out to be a great trip because from Kevin, I was just so interested in visiting universities. So I saw
look at Kevin. Kevin got you curious. So did you see some?
I did. I saw some universities, and I can't pronounce the names.
I hear you. At least you got there.
Sweden and Netherlands.
Sure.
And they, it's really a testament, and I feel like here in the U.S. it would behoove every university to send students to go see, efficient or effective government spending, because education in those countries is free through graduate school. And I just, it's a different world over there. I mean, we wouldn't have a job,
sure.
Nobody would have to pay us to get into college, but
yeah, you have to be comfortable with high taxation, but you get a lot for that. You get a lot for those taxes when it comes to, you're not paying crazy, outrageous prices for school or your health care. So it's just, you can certainly make a great case for that, and you have less homelessness and other things too.
Yeah. I mean, I think in Sweden, maybe I saw 15 unhoused people, and in Norway, 5, maybe. And that's a conscious choice. Like, you have to work hard to stay out on the streets in those countries. So yeah, it definitely high taxation, but wow, the benefits are incredible. Wow.
No, they really are. So listen, Vince, I we're just coming off this 2-parter with Mark Hatch, and there were multiple times in the conversation that Susan and I were having with Mark. I'm thinking, emblazoned in my mind is Vince Garcia, class of 1989 at Occidental. And so I almost brought it up with him because I'm like, see, he was at Oxy, I think like 95, 96 to 01. I'm thinking, probably doesn't know Vince. He just missed him. But apparently you have a good Mark Hatch story. You know Mark. So what can you share?
Sure. Yeah, Mark is tremendous. And I credit him and Michael Thorpe with getting me into college counseling. So wow. I had worked at Oxy from 89 to 91. And actually, Mark dated somebody who, a dean at Harvard Westlake. And so I got to meet Mark. And
sure, because he was working at Harvard Westlake. They probably met there. Yeah.
Yes. He was working there. And I took a brief sabbatical and worked in a small business. And then I did some volunteer college counseling at Belmont High School, which is this really large public school in downtown LA. It now has probably fewer students, but at the time I was there, it had 3,000 students, wow. 4 tracks. I mean, it was wild. Mm-hmm. And 1 college counselor. And so I said to Mark that I eventually wanted one day to transition into college counseling. So I met with him at Harvard Westlake, and he suggested, volunteering at a high school. And that's really where I started working with students, probably in 91. I started doing that, and I was really, really able to help Michael Thorpe with some of his students. And that year, I think we placed students at MIT and Pomona and Claremont McKenna and Oxy. But Mark has, done masterful work at, both Oxy and certainly Colorado College. And his wife or partner is, I worked with her brother when I was on the high school side. So we go back a long ways. And
he's a funny guy, isn't he? He had, like, we did a pre-meeting before as well. He had Susan and I cracking up.
He is a funny guy. And he's done a terrific job keeping Colorado College on the, tip of people's minds and tongue, because, it's Colorado Springs is not the first place you think about going to college, but it's Colorado College is an amazing opportunity, and it really works for a lot of students.
Awesome. Great. Well, I said last time when you were up here in the saddle, you did such a good job of describing the article. I was very serious. I'm like, you have a new job. You're at Dave status now. I'll let you do the summaries, and we have an exciting article to talk about. But before we dive into that, admissions tip. So my tip today is for these schools that have college-specific questions, which a lot of the selective ones do, and some of the modestly selective schools do. Take a look at their 2022 question versus their 2023 question. Because I can assure you that if there was a change, it was very intentional. It was very intentional. And they're asking the questions they ask, not willy-nilly, for no throwing darts at dartboards and eeny, meeny, miny, mo stuff. Like, they're really intentional. And there's a reason why they're asking what they're asking. They're either revealing an important component to you of who they are or who they want to be. And, I would argue that even if it stayed the same, that's important, because they're saying that they got such great value out of the question they asked last year, and a reader's reading the thing 1,000 times that they'll have people read the question another 1,000 times. So it's kind of a no-lose scenario to go back and compare. If it's the same, they saw great value to it. If it changed, there's something they're trying to suss out in the applicant pool as they're trying to ascertain whether or not a student is a match and fit for the culture. Anything you want to say on that, Vince?
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. I had never thought about it that way. And I think this year in the supplements, we're seeing a lot of change and maybe a new question focusing on diversity.
They really are. Yeah.
Thank you, Chief Justice Roberts. We're just going to turn it right back and ask the question blatantly. So anyway, I think one of the things that we're doing with students is almost starting with that question, and it helps them think about the world and their place in it in regards to diversity. People, I would say students think of it typically as just in regards to race, but it can include geography or learning difference. There's just so many ways to look at that question.
Oh yeah, you got social class, you have gender, you have religion, you have culture, and then you have experiential diversity, which is also thought diversity or perspective diversity that can be very rich. The person that lived in 5 different countries, the parents worked for the State Department, they moved around and they think differently, and the schools value that. So yeah, I think maybe someday, maybe one good thing about the decision is maybe people will not just immediately go to race when they think of diversity and realize just how broad that term is from a college's perspective. I don't think the average person understands how much when you're in an institution and you're trying to educate, how much you value different perspectives, especially in residential communities. I think sometimes it can feel a little theoretical, like an abstraction, like, kind of not maybe nice, but not necessary. But the way most schools feel is, no, we can't educate critical thinkers nowhere near to the level that we want to without having all voices around the table and having people challenge other people's suppositions and upbringings. So yeah, so that's the tip of the day. And the admissions vernacular, I'm going to Pomona for this one. So I attended an event which I've referenced a few times, a couple Monday episodes in a row on it, looking at just feedback from. I got a lot of bang out of an hour and a half lunch with Emory and Rice and Wash U and Cornell and Pomona. They all had to do their spiels and speeches, but what I liked about it is it was a group of counselors, and so it wasn't just the traditional info session. That you can come to our schools if you want that full blown thing. We're gonna just talk about updates, what's new. But the Pomona rep, he went through the whole Pomona's core values in terms of what they look for, and what you and I often call PQs, personal qualities, he called PTs, personal traits. So that's our vernacular for the word. When I see PT, I think physical therapy or part-time. First thing I think is part-time or physical therapy. But PTs was personal traits. Wow. in the Pomona 5. Yeah, things changed, Vince, because you were in the admission office there, and I don't think they used that term when you were there with Bruce Palk and the gang.
No, I think, and I'd be careful, Pomona. Personal traits, that sounds like Harvard, like, behind the scene. This personality of this particular group of people is this. So personal trait, I don't know. Maybe I like the old word better.
Yeah, I'm more PQs because honestly, there's a lot of PTs. For me, it's like, honestly, my mind goes right to physical therapy or part-time, but to each his own.
Yeah.
And our big number is 85,000. I attended a session this morning, about an hour and a half ago. No, that's not true. Vince and I are recording at 1 Eastern, 10 Pacific, and this was at 9 a.m., so 4 hours ago. And Georgia Tech, their average first-year student, 85,000 is their average salary for a first-year student, and that's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah, like if you think about it, the national average for a family of 4 is right now between 66 and 68,000. So I ran those numbers. That's 25% more than the average household of 4 for a 22-year-old coming out.
Wow.
Now, we always see these high salaries at the Harvey Mudds and the Illinois Institute of Technologies and the Stevens, right? So these tech schools, because tech jobs pay higher.
Yeah.
But the reason I wanted to bring it up is if you're really contemplating, can I do student loans or how much student loans you can do, I'm a believer at looking at your expected first year income. And there's a big difference between somebody coming out making 85 and making 35 when you're looking at how much loan debt can you incur.
Yeah.
You have $40,000 of loan debt at 85, you can bang that out pretty quickly. You can knock that out in 2-3 years.
Yeah.
But you got to graduate. You have to graduate. So anyway, we have a really interesting article to discuss. I think some of your listeners are regular listeners, what I call our listening family, those who never miss an episode. We have a nice little active text message group with all our co-hosts, and we share a lot of articles, and we ask each other questions, and iron sharpens iron, so we just kind of keep each other's skills sharp. And this was actually an article Vince threw into our message group for discussion, and I liked it. I said, hey, why don't you make it our next article, Vince? Let's do it. So here we are. Take it away, Vince.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
All right. Well, this is a great article because it turns the spotlight back onto universities, the public flagship universities. The Wall Street Journal wrote a great article called "Colleges Spend Like There's No Tomorrow. These places are just devouring money." Students foot the bill for flagship state universities that pour money into new buildings and programs with little pushback. And this was co-authored by Melissa Korn, who's their education writer and editor, Andrea Fuller, and Jennifer Forsyth. And that the thing that's really interesting about this article is that it talks about how some states and universities, and well, actually 49 public universities, that would be UConn, Penn State, University of Idaho, they every single one of them has increased spending on par 38% more than they did 5 years ago. And what's interesting about that is only the University of Idaho was the only one where what they were spending and what they were charging actually went down. So kudos to University of Idaho. But what this study did is looking at the 50 public flagships, which tend to be really popular and very affordable options, you're seeing marked increases in price and spending that's mixed, maybe rivals the federal government. I don't know. But they're spending things on trying to attract and improve reputations, but with little sort of feedback or accountability for lots of reasons. And I'll talk about that at the end, on spending money on facilities, sports teams and coaches, administration. You have, they gave a great example at the University of Florida where different departments, publications, media had their own budgets. And in 5 years, the number of people who are at the associate or director level increased 15%. And in order to foot this bill, they have passed the cost of going to these universities onto the students. And they really came down hard on 3 schools: University of Kentucky, Penn State, and the University of Oklahoma. Kentucky, which is one of the nation's poorest states, actually has one of the highest public tuition rates relative to their state income. Penn State is spending so much money on all these other things that they actually went into a deficit. And then the University of Oklahoma has increased what it cost in the last 15 years, almost 74%. And they really have been sort of unfettered and unchecked in terms of what they're spending it on. They talk about this monastery that they rebuilt in Italy. I didn't really understand why they were doing that. But part of the point of the article is it's the job of the trustees of each of these universities to control costs. But there's a lack of information, even in reporting to the federal government. They talked about, I think it was the University of Mississippi, they reported one number, and then when the Wall Street Journal actually looked at their sort of tax returns, there was almost $1 billion difference from what was reported. So trustees have little information. There's no standards. Like, this is how we should, no state has standards about what is necessary and reportable. So I think the point of the article was to bring attention. The most affordable option in the United States for many of its citizens are the flagship public universities. And you're seeing these increase in tuition costs that are more than double. It's the most expensive expense, and it's more expensive to go to college than healthcare. So I think the point was we need some guidelines and some rules, and this unfettered spending on all these programs might be justified. But we also have to think about, on the other end, you have students who are their debt load. If you keep pushing the cost to students and families, they're going to stop going or find more affordable ways to do it. And it was just sort of a siren or a warning siren to say, hey, let's take a look at this and come up with some ways to amend this.
No, thanks for that, Vince. And, I had a flashback about 4 years ago when I got really concerned with mental health, and we did 10 straight recommended resources in a row related to student mental health. And there are at least 5 sort of eye-popping numbers, maybe more, in this article. And so I'm going to do something similar. And for the next, it's at least 5, maybe even 7, I got to go tally them up, weeks, I'm going to pull a big number out of this article, because there were so many statistical things that they shared to show how outrageous the spending is, particularly on amenities, at these schools. So you'll be hearing me quote from this article for at least the next 5-6 weeks. But, I want to just share a thought that's been percolating in my mind for a while, and I partly hesitate to do this because I don't want to steal the thunder from an up-and-coming interview. So our regular listeners know that Lee Coffin is the current interview right now. Julie and I are interviewing Lee Coffin, VP of Enrollment at Dartmouth. Friends, I tried to be slick, and it kind of bit me in the butt. So Vince and I actually recorded this some time ago, and I expected we would be running the 3-part spotlight from Lee Coffin on Dartmouth College this week. But we decided to switch up and come back to that rather than let you hear the same voice for 7 consecutive weeks. So that explains why I referenced that our current interview is with Lee Coffin and that Ron Lieber will be coming up next. This episode is the last in the 4-parter we're doing with Lee on what I'm calling tough questions about college admissions. And then we transition to another 3-parter just looking at Dartmouth. It's really a college spotlight on Dartmouth. But my interview after that is with Ron Lieber, who's the lead money columnist for the New York Times. And I'm calling that tough questions about paying for college. And I recorded it actually 2 days ago. We did the recording. And I partly hesitate to do this because I don't want to rob all the juice out of that one. But he's really got me thinking, and I'll tell you what I'm referring to. And when you hear it, Vince, it'll flash back to this.
Yeah.
So I asked him a question, on there about the cost of college, the astronomical rise of cost of college. And I went over all the different scenarios when you read all these reasons why is the cost of college going so high. I asked him what he thought. Some people argue it's all this investment in amenities, and some people argue it's administrative bloat, and And some people argue, well, the states and the federal government have cut back on giving appropriations, and so they just pass it on to the consumer because they don't want to divert their tax dollars, to higher ed when they can invest in K-12, or they can invest in roads and bridges and police and firemen and pensions and all the other things that come out of taxpayer budgets. And then some people argue that it's the fact that in some ways there's almost unlimited money with Parent Plus loans and with Grad Plus loans and unsubsidized graduate loans, that with unlimited borrowing there, it's almost like schools can just pass on the cost, and then people borrow, and then you get this. So I was asking about this, right? Because those are all the competing arguments out there when you hear what is the reason college costs are, so exorbitant. He took the conversation in a really different direction, and in reading, and I actually liked what he said. It really has got me thinking. And basically, he took it in a market forces direction. And in essence, what he said was the colleges could never get away with charging so much if there wasn't a demand for it. And I don't see the demand shrinking. As long as people continue to pay, it's going to continue to happen, because basically this is what people. And so at one point I said to him, because we went through all the costs, right? We went through all the things that are different now versus when you and I went to college. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The expectations with food, and the expectations with the student center, and the expectations with big time sports and facilities and gym equipment and dorms and then not to mention and really good things, right? Like how well you want the mental health to be staffed, and how well you expect the career center to be staffed, and how well you expect the academic supports and all of this stuff. And at one point I said to him, so basically what you're saying is that people want the Ritz-Carlton or the Four Seasons, but they want to pay Motel 6 prices. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, because while it's true that Penn State has a shortage, and that's a statewide thing. I mean, look at what's going on with the regional schools in the state in Pennsylvania. I mean, it's been disastrous when you look at the regional, colleges, regional publics. I mean, massive mergers, or it had to be a massive merger. You have closures because you're talking about places down 30, 40, 50%. So a lot of stuff just going on with Penn State. And some of that is out migration from the state. And some of it has one of the most expensive one of the most expensive tuition charges of any state in the country.
Yes.
So, but other places, you're not seeing that, right? Like a lot of the places they quote in here, the Oklahomas, the Kentuckys, the Yukons. And, it's just got me wondering, to what extent have we raised a whole generation of people that want education, but they also want the country club? And they might not put it that way. That might be a bit of an exaggeration. In fact, we even talked about High Point in that conversation, and he pushed back a little bit on me. He said, "Well, I'm not saying the Ritz, but how about the Marriott or the Hilton?
Right. Courtyard by Marriott."
Yeah. and so I wouldn't have even thought, my imagination didn't even go there when I went to college. Like, you have corridor style dorms with 60 people in a long row in a community shower. I'm not thinking about anything that looks closer to a hotel than a dorm room.
Right.
But that once you start going there and people, you start eating at the really fine dining places, it's not that easy to go back to, to the Burger King. So,
right.
And I think there's a lot of that here. And so the question always to me is that whole thing, what's the saying, what came first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing? Like, is it the schools did outlandish, irresponsible spending, and then they had to pass the cost on to the consumer? Or is it the consumer demanded, if you don't give me these amenities, I'll take my butt elsewhere? Because I see some other places on my college list that are giving me the amenities that I want. And then the school comes back and says, we got to upgrade our food. People don't like it. We got to upgrade our dorms. We got to upgrade our athletic program. We're not winning enough. We got to pay more on a better coach. We got to, then the coach says, I need a multi-million-dollar practice facilities and blah, blah, blah. And it kind of just keeps going on and on and on. And so that's kind of where my mind went with this article, is to what degree is this just what the public wants and schools are giving the public what they want? Friends, I head to my mom's 85th multi-day celebration. So we are dividing this article up over 2 weeks so I don't have to record a podcast at my mom's 85th. We hope you'll join us next week for the final part of this discussion on the Wall Street Journal article, These Colleges Spend Like There's No Tomorrow. Some colleges are just devouring money.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Friend, somebody astutely coined the phrase variety is the spice of life. So we're going to do something really creative for our question from a listener section. I'm not currently reading admission files. I'm sure I'm regularly in touch with those who do, but it's not exactly the same. Susan's the one on our team who still is reading files, but even Susan's not making all of the decisions that a full-time admission officer or senior level staff member is making. For that reason, from time to time, I'm going to let you hear an answer to one of the questions that our listeners send in by Speakpipe, not from one of our co-hosts, but directly from an admission officer. So when is this going to occur? Well, often it will be when I personally want to hear their answer from a question. It may be a time when I might think that they might have a more fuller or robust answer, or they can answer it more comprehensively than I do, just by the fact that they're in their reading files every day. And they just might have a unique perspective that I think you would benefit immensely from hearing. Sometimes it's just simply going to be because, hey, variety makes our podcast interesting. Mix it up a little bit. Well, in this particular time, it also has to do with the fact that Anitra and I and Karis and Joy are flying out in a couple hours, but getting ready to head to the airport after I record this for my mom's 85th. So over the next 2 weeks are kind of really good weeks for me, just to be totally honest and keep it real, not having to produce an episode, when I'm really at my mom's 85th. This Thursday episode in particular, it's really like doing 4 podcasts in one. So there's a lot of coordination and I love it to death. I look forward every week to coming and meeting with you guys, but it is challenging when you're on the road. And so we're intentionally choosing to run this while I'm in Canada this week and next week. So what admission officers will you be hearing from? Well, Colorado College team, and our spokesperson will be Hillary Dickman. And Hillary at times will just draw off her own knowledge, and also times she'll take the pulse of some of the other senior leaders in the office. I want to say a word about Colorado College. Why have we chosen to partner with Colorado College on our podcast? Well, there's a couple reasons. One, it's so easy to be coast-centric, right? Southeast, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, or West Coast. And oftentimes the middle of the country gets overlooked. And that's unfortunate. And so it's an opportunity to hear perspectives from a top-notch school in the middle of the country. But the other reason, and this is important for you to realize because it has ramifications for you even understanding your own high school, relationships get established. And so I had the fortune of getting to know Hillary Dickman, Karen Christoph, Matt Bonser, and Susan has a 40-year plus relationship with Mark Hatch. And we have established relationships. We know the quality of the individuals. We have tremendous respect for them as professionals. And relationships. I say that because one of the keys sometimes to understanding your own high school and why it seems like gee, seems like we send quite a few kids to this school. If you were to dig into the history, you would see it has to do with established relationships. So without any further ado, the next voice you'll hear will be an anonymous listener asking a Speakpipe question about the demographics section in the Common App that asks, how long have you been in the United States? And then immediately after that listener, you'll hear a Speakpipe response from Hillary Dickman from Colorado College. Listen and enjoy.
Hey, I'm a parent fan. This is a really great program. Thanks so much for hosting it, Mark. I'm wondering about a question under the demographics section in the Common App that I've seen for a couple of schools now. This question is, how many years have you lived in the United States? We are U.S. citizens, and our senior was born in the U.S., but we moved overseas for a job for a few years when our kids were little. This means the answer for this question will not be 17 or 18 years, but more like 13 or 14. I'm wondering what colleges are doing with this information. There's no place to further qualify or explain this in this section. Students can only input or select a number. Also, since this experience was long ago, it is not reflected in our seniors' educational history. I can think of some reasons why colleges might want to know this, but without any further room to qualify when and where the applicant lived overseas, it seems odd. We also have a last name that clearly pegs our senior as an overrepresented minority that some people might think of as foreign or being in a recent immigrant category. So I guess I'm feeling a little sensitive to the idea that this is also a test of how American or assimilated our student might be. Thanks so much, Mark.
Hello, YCBK team. This is Hillary from Colorado College. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to answer this question. So first, I want to acknowledge that I can hear the anxiety in this caller's voice, and I'm really sorry. This is a tough place to be, and I hope that my answer can be reassuring for you. So first, I would say that this particular question is a very small data point in the application, and we do not use small data points to make big assumptions. So this is a question specifically that we barely pay attention to. It can be useful from time to time. One of those times is when a student has spent the bulk of their life outside of the US and maybe gone to secondary school in the US. It can help us add context to their secondary school record and understand their academics better. The other time is when we're thinking about what kind of addition the student will make to our college community. And this might be my bias. We spent a year living in Mexico when my kids were really young, and I saw how that changed them as people and gave them a different perspective on the world than their peers who've spent their whole lives in the US. And it's a perspective that I really value and think is a good one to have on a college campus. So for me, any time spent abroad is actually a net positive for our community. So hopefully that's reassuring to you. Just remember, we don't use small data points to make big assumptions.
Friends, colleges are not just giving lip service when they say that they value diversity of perspective. It's extremely valuable. Vince and I talked about this earlier in today's episode and how important this diversity of perspective is. Sometimes when I'm working, particularly with a Caucasian student, they really struggle when the diversity questions come up, particularly for the custom questions colleges ask in addition to the personal statement. And that's because their society has oftentimes equated preposterously diversity with race. That's just one of many lenses or dimensions of diversity. When I have a student who's lived overseas or quite frankly had any diverse experience, I get really excited because I know what they're bringing to a college has value. Let's say I'm working with a student and they grew up in a home where their parents were always taking in foster kids. Well, first of all, this is personally very inspirational to me. Somebody would make that type of self-sacrifice and invest in a kid that had been, neglected or in need of really real parents, supportive, loving, caring parents like that. I'm going to get very excited though, because from a college admissions perspective, you can talk about diversity of perspective. And I thought Hillary's answer really underscored the value of diversity of experiences, diversity of perspective. I want to thank our listener and Hillary and the Colorado College team for sharing this. And if you like this, you're going to get it again next week. to another question. Listener, please reach out to us at questions@yourcollegebounkid.com so we can send you a copy of Elliot Felix's book, How to Get the Most Out of College, 127 Ways to Make Connections, Make It Work for You, and Make a Difference.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, in part 2 of what's a 4-part interview with Ron Lieber, I continue our conversation about the objections that financial aid officers have about giving a guaranteed price in advance of a student applying, and share reasons why they feel it is not realistic for colleges to do this. And I ask Ron for his opinion of each of the different reasons that they state. I also ask Ron, why do so few schools do what Whitman and College of Worcester do? If it was such a good idea, people usually copy what is working out there in the world of financial aid and admissions. Listen and enjoy.
Don't you want more people chasing after you and feeling good about the place so that you can become their first choices? Because that means your yield is higher, right? More people are going to say yes when you apply. More people are going to apply. More people are going to say yes when they get in, and more people are going to apply early decision. And these are all things that help you, right? That help your business. So, why not tell people what it's going to cost instead of making them guess?
So let me share with you some of the other objections I've heard and just get your thoughts on them. Another admission officer said to me, what if we have a really high yield one year and we're putting that much money out on the street and committing to it, and then we have a ridiculously high yield and then we go way over our budget? Like, we can't commit to that. So what are your thoughts on that? I'm sure you've probably heard all these things I'm hearing too, but I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
If that was the way things were working, Whitman and Worcester wouldn't do this anymore. But if you're worried about high yield, if you think transparency is going to cause more people to say yes, that's a high class problem. And I thought the reason you were paying 6 or 7 figures to fancy consulting firms to rent you their algorithms so that you could price correctly in the first place was so that you could price correctly in the first place. And if you price correctly in the first place, and you're lowballing a certain number of people who get in, then your yield, right, the number of people who come, is going to land in an appropriate spot. And you're going to have the right number of beds for the right number of heads, and it's not going to bust your budget or create a housing problem. And if you can't get that right, why should that be the problem of the potential consumer, right? Why should the applicant have to suffer in, opacity and confusion because you can't get your yield right?
What they would say, some of them I talk to, is, do you know how hard it is to predict the behavior of 17 and 18-year-olds? You probably have a hard time with your own kid. Try doing it when you have 5,000 or 10,000. Like, yeah, we hire all those people, but they still can be 20% off in a given year. It's just that complicated. That's what I hear. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but that's the response that I hear, is that we'll continue to hire them because they give us an extra edge. They help us to know sometimes what's going on in the world outside of our world. We get caught up in our own little bubble. It's nice sometimes they bring some good comparison data, what similar schools are doing. Anything at all we can get to help us with yield is great, but they're oftentimes off, and we see 20% swings every year on our projections. One school said to me that we literally interviewed 20 companies and narrowed it down to 6, and we're pairing one school that's using one model with another model, but we've learned that they're not that accurate. We still think they're worth the investment, but they're just not. Any thoughts?
When they say, I don't think you understand how hard it is to be in our shoes, that's true because I'm not in their shoes, but I am in the shoes of a parent of a 17-year-old. I am in the shoes of somebody who talks to a lot of parents and 17-year-olds. And, my retort back is that it's harder to be a 17-year-old who doesn't have the faintest idea what schools might be affordable, and yet has to commit to applying to a relatively small number of them without knowing within six figures what the cost is going to be. I have more sympathy for the 17-year-old than I have for the financial aid administrator. And that doesn't make any of this easy, but I don't know. I'm going to side with the teenager on that one.
And then some schools say, and this is particularly when need-based is coming into play, that need-based looks at schools looks at income and assets on a year-by-year basis. And there can be tremendous swing from one year to the next in a family's income and assets. We can't commit 4 years out when the family income and assets could drastically change from year one to year two. And any thoughts on that line? I'm just telling you all the things I hear because I got really inspired by what you were doing. I've always, like I said, I've worked with Franklin Marshall for 20 years, and they've done this for ED. They were trying to incentivize us when I worked at a boarding school to get our kids to apply ED, and they said, we'll give you a full-blown tax return evaluation. And they did it if for ED applicants to incentivize them. So, I've been a fan of this, but I've encountered resistance, and I've always asked myself, why are there so few schools doing it? You would think it would be a big plus factor. You think it would be an incentive, something you would tout. And I think for the two schools that are doing it, just because I recently visited them, they do think that it's working for them. Like they're able to make the case and families like it. But normally in admissions, people copy stuff they think works. And there obviously are reasons why there's so few people lining up to give the price guarantees and to commit to a fixed number. Just want to know your thoughts.
Yeah, so a couple of things about that. I totally understand that a 4-year upfront price guarantee based on need-based aid is completely unrealistic. And it is possible that I did not draw a clear enough line, in that story that I wrote, making it crystal clear that I understood that income and assets can fluctuate by a lot. So I no argument there.
You know what? I think you were fairly clear. I went back and read it last night, and you said, can we at least start with a 1 year? Okay, you don't want to do a 4 year. Can we start with a 1 year and agree on that? So, I know not all the listeners have read everything you've said. And so some of this is, I'm not criticizing you. I'm trying to just bring up some of the talking points that are out there and some of the rebuttals that you hear.
Sure. But, the other thing I would say is, your question is an excellent one. If this is such a great idea, why don't more institutions do it? And the fact of the matter is they are, right? I have challenged, every one of my readers to go to other institutions and say, Whitman and Worcester are giving me a merit aid pre-read. Will you please give me one too? And there are definitely other schools that will do it. They are reluctant to say so in public to me, in an article, let alone broadcast it on their websites because they are afraid of the volume. Now, if they called up Worcester and Whitman and said, what's the volume? They would find out that the volume is not so crazy high that they can't afford it or, have to stop doing it. And, the point at which it becomes so high volume that you can't afford to do it anymore, then say that. But to not try because you have such certainty about what you think the result will be, while at the same time crying that you can't predict your yield, right? It's like if you can't predict your yield, then you probably can't predict how many people will pick up the phone and ask you, for a pre-read, right? So it's like you want to plead confusion and it's hard in one instance, but here you seem to have complete conviction that this wouldn't work and it would be impossible. And my message is, why don't you give it a try?
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
This is Linda with this week's recommended resource, Diverse Issues in Higher Education. This website is an information hub for those interested in the ever-evolving landscape of higher ed with an emphasis on diversity. The resources include diverse a bi-weekly news magazine with a focus on diversity, inclusion, and opportunity. Recent topics covered range from tenure and faculty salaries to recruitment, retention, and equitable access. They're also the force behind In the Margins podcast. Episodes explore subjects on the student experience, faculty perspectives, and the rising cost of college. One key feature to check out is the Top 100 Degree Producers. This is a ranking system showcasing institutions granting the highest number of degrees to minority students. The tool allows for searches by degree level, ethnicity, major, and state. Explore these features and stay updated on the latest in higher ed at diverseeducation.com.
Yeah, I want to give you a compliment, Ron. So you heard a podcast we did where we discussed one of your articles. That's when we first started communicating. And I agreed with 75 or 80%, but not all of it. And I remember you saying one of the reasons I wanted to come on your podcast is because you disagreed with me on some things, which I think said a lot about your willingness to entertain different thoughts. I think the only thing I don't completely agree with you on is the ability for a school, or whether I should say the sagacity, the wisdom to a school doing it for merit aid, not need-based. For need-based, I'm not sympathetic. For merit-based, I see building a class the same way I see adding somebody to your company. You can't do it off test scores and grades. That's such a faulty metric. You're not going to make a good decision. And so I don't know how in the world you could calculate some algorithm that could take into consideration all of the factors that you really want to do when you're looking at building a class. And so, I think the only thing I've heard you say that I guess I could support along these lines, because I am very sympathetic to how can you ask people to pay what, let's face it, for some schools is a $400,000 after-tax commitment, because we know 3 to 5% increases every year. You don't have to do the math to do very much math to know a sophomore right now is going to be at the most expensive schools is going to be looking at $100K a year, right? And you're like, you just can't do it. I'm sympathetic to that. And so one thing I think you've said that I've noodled on is, okay, well, then you're going to have to allow people to back out if they don't get the merit money that they thought they would get. I get why schools don't want to do that, because then the whole thing goes down like a deck of cards and they lose the ability to to build their class, which is already really, really hard, like to build your class and not under or over enroll. But any thoughts on that? Because I don't see how you can do it for merit aid in a true way. If you're really doing holistic admissions, and to me, that's the best way to do admissions with all of its flaws, because you can take into consideration so many things. And like I use the analogy, if you had a 3 or 4 person company and you're looking to hire someone, you're not going to use test scores or grades or AP scores to make the decision. You're going to look at a multiplicity of factors. To me, that analogy works. But maybe, and I did admissions for a decade, and I've been on the college counseling side, so I kind of see both sides. Like, part of me bristles a little bit because, I am sympathetic to how hard it is to predict yield and not under enroll or over enroll. So I get why schools would not, like the whole ED thing would almost go down like a deck of cards if someone said, well, I thought I was going to get 40,000. You gave me nothing. I'm out. But some people argue BD doesn't need to be here anyway from a standpoint of fairness and equity. But your thoughts?
Well, just leaving the fairness and equity, argument or conversation aside, and it's always a good conversation to have. In what universe should we bind people to buy a product before we've told them what the price is, and it might swing by 6 figures? Early decision is not binding, and it shouldn't be. And if you don't like the price, take a walk. And, after fighting this over multiple columns, it became clear that, NACAC didn't have a problem with that. The Common App needed to be rewritten because it was wrong, essentially, in the way that it was worded. And, eventually, even Northeastern, agreed that if you can't afford it, you should not have to come. I mean, the case is closed. Early decision is not binding. And so, that doesn't keep, nor should it, keep from businesses, I mean schools, should it keep schools from attempting to stuff their classes on the front end with a disproportionate number of full pay families, often so that those families can cross subsidize lower income admits, in the later rounds. And, that cross subsidization is a really good thing for schools that don't have big endowments with earnings that are being tossed into the financial aid pool. Look, I get it. And in fact, there is a certain amount of equity in locking in, a bunch of guaranteed revenue so that you can then take some of that money and effectively subsidize the discounts for people who really need it. But let's not force people for whom money is not no object, into a quasi agreement that has no legal standing, quote unquote, requiring them to come no matter what the price is. No.
So let me ask one last question on this, and then we got some other topics to get to. So what movement, if any, have you seen from schools on either being willing to do full tax return reviews, besides Whitman and Worcester, or it sounds like you've seen some movement on schools saying, yeah, if you don't get the merit aid package that you felt you needed, we'll release you from your commitment. And can you name names of people that have changed policy, or is this all clandestine, like on the side? They kind of whisper, hey, I don't want to broadcast it, but we'll work something out, versus no, we can, they're willing to go public. Like, what progress have you seen at people willing to change their public proclamations on either of those things?
When I talk, I guess let me put it this way. I haven't written about either of these things for the New York Times in a while. And, I write about everything under the sun that hits you in the wallet, although I have a passion for this area. And so I haven't had an opportunity to really try to pin people down on the record in a way where they sort of feel like they can't avoid the question without looking like, they're evading the question. Without the ability to sort of get people on the record, I can't name names, but it's definitely the case that, schools are doing merit aid pre-reads, especially for people, for students who seem exceptional, kind of on the surface. More than one person inside of admissions offices have told me, just in passing, casually, off the record, and a number of counselors have said the same thing, that, schools have seen, the walk away percentage of the early decision admits go from something like 0 to something like 1% or maybe even 2%. And that's almost always for financial reasons. And so I like to think that I'm doing at least a little bit of good in the world by continuing to go around and say, if you can't afford the offer, you don't have to go. Part of the resistance here, frankly, is counselors who continue to believe, against all evidence, that schools are going to hold it against future applicants, who are younger, if somebody walks away from, an ED acceptance. And I've literally spent a decade now begging college counselors to come to me and come on the record if they can document a school holding it against them, in that instance, and that I would be glad to call that school, drag them onto the record in the New York Times, and figure out once and for all whether they're really punishing schools in future years if people walk away from an early decision acceptance. And no one has ever taken me up on it. So I don't believe that it happens. I think it's a myth.
Well, I can tell you, it's certainly a perception amongst counselors. They, because they feel like they have to sign their name on that. And they feel like, in fact, I literally came up at a luncheon I was at today where a parent had been telling a college counselor, we're going to apply ED, but you negotiate everything in life. And if we don't get the package that we want, then we're out. And this is one of the more famous college counselors in the country. I can't mention their name here, but they said, then I will not sign your ED agreement. You're not going to put my reputation on the line and our school's reputation on the line. I can tell you the perception amongst schools, and they'll have some stories that they feel like this kid, rescinded on an ED agreement, and we never got any kids in that school for the next 3 years. So to the extent to which perception is reality, that perception is very much out there. And I do understand why that's going to be really hard to get somebody on the record for talking about that, because they think if I come on the record, now I'm going to get punished for the next 10 years. So I can't go to the New York Times and say this school was vindictive to me and we never got any kids in. So I don't necessarily think you can use whether people come on the record as an indication of whether or not it happens. Just giving you my opinion.
That's completely fair. And I will say this, we are speaking in relatively broad strokes there. But if I'm that, famous college counselor in Atlanta, I'm actually doing the same thing, right? Because there's a way to do this, and behave like a jerk. And there's a way to do this the right way, right? So if I have filled out the net price calculator and I made no errors, and then the offer comes back in the early decision round, and it's a need-based offer, and it's, 10 or 15% or more off what the calculator actually said it should be, and the school won't budge, I think it's perfectly fine to walk away. If you haven't filled out the net price calculator, then you haven't done your job as the applicant, and the counselor should not support that sort of behavior. Ditto merit aid. If the school will not estimate merit aid in the net price calculator, if it won't do a pre-read, if it doesn't have a grid, and it still offers early decision, and therefore the price could swing by, a six-figure amount over 4 years, I don't see how that school justifies holding it against the family, right? I mean, it's the schools themselves that invented the phrase felt need. They wouldn't be offering merit aid in the first place if there wasn't a gap between people's ability to pay and or their supposed ability and their willingness to do so. They wouldn't be offering merit aid if they weren't already in a non-ideal market position. So they can't very well hold it against the family. And if the family's going to walk away because the kid got lowballed on merit aid during the early decision round, the counselor can go to the school that the counselor has the relationship with and said, look, like I get differing minds can differ about, whether you feel as a school like you can quote a merit aid number before someone applies. But the fact of the matter here is that this family really does not feel like it can afford the price. And it is within, the normal and acceptable course of behavior here, which we're both members of, that they can do this. Now, I don't feel good about this either, but I find it difficult to believe that you would hold this against my students in the future, because I don't feel like this family is doing anything wrong. If that school holds it against the counselor in the school in the future, then, that's not a school as a counselor I would feel comfortable sending my students to anymore.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. The only problem is some of those schools the families really want to go to. But
well, they're not good schools at that point, if that's the way they're conducting themselves.
There's a couple of things you said I really agree with. One is the family's got to do their due diligence and do the net price calculator. That is an expectation. You can't come back and say, oh, wow, I thought I was going to pay $20,000. You're asking me to pay $60,000. And, you didn't do the calculator, because we know of the massive difference between people's perception of their EFC and the reality. And we know how much these schools take of your discretionary money and expect it to go to college, which is a whole other question that I'm sure you've been outspoken on in the past. So you have to do that. And then another thing you said I really agree with is there should be a warning. If there's some inaccuracies or some unique complexities in the calculator, there should be some big neon, warning sign. Friends, this concludes the second part of what's a 4-part interview with Ron Lieber, lead money writer for the New York Times. Hopefully you'll enjoy part 3 and you'll join us next Thursday.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
Friends, you're in for a real treat. I thought Linda did a great job on this spotlight on Rice. very proud of both of my colleagues, both at Your College Bound Kid, and we also work together at School Match for You, Linda and Lisa and I. This is that deep dive that you expect from Your College Bound Kid, from Linda. And Lisa asks her usual great questions and brings her usual great sense of humor that those who know us know that she possesses. It's a two-parter, but this is part 1 of 2. Listen and enjoy.
Hi, this is Linda, one of the co-hosts on Your College Bound Kid, and I'm here with one of my other favorite co-hosts, Dr.
Right
Lisa
back
Ruff.
at ya.
And today we are going to talk about Rice University, which I know I probably say this about almost all colleges, but it really is one of my favorites.
Well, after doing a little bit more reading about it to prepare to learn from you today, I can see why already. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to tell us.
Yeah, it's, well, let's just get into it. I'm going to start with a little bit of the history. And it's kind of like a Lifetime movie kind of story, the way this started. William Marsh Rice, who was one of those, early tycoons, made his fortune in real estate and railroads. But he wanted to create a tuition-free school upon his death. And his butler or valet.
Yeah, I read that.
I know, it's so crazy. Actually killed him by chloroform, just like in the movies, and then forged a will. Eventually, law enforcement won out. He was arrested, and the school was finally founded. And classes began back in 1912. On the 12th anniversary of his death. So unfortunately, things were delayed, but it's an interesting story, and there really should be a movie about that. It sounds really fascinating.
Hey, Linda, this is like just a tangential question, but are there any like ghosts haunting, like William Rice's haunting the university stories that you've heard of? Because it just seems like that should be part of the movie, if not part of reality.
I haven't heard that, but now you've got me nervous. And
he's like a nice ghost, so he like pays your tuition for you. He's like so nice.
No, I have not heard that among the many stories about Rice. I have not heard about the ghost, but probably, right?
I think we just started one.
Yeah. Sorry, students. Don't be frightened. So the first president was actually the former head of Princeton's University of Department of Mathematics and Astronomy, Edgar Odell Levitt. And he was recommended by Princeton's then president, Woodrow Wilson, who you may remember from U.S. history.
Yes.
He took a tour of colleges and incorporated things that he saw that he really liked. And he drew heavily from Cambridge, Princeton, and Yale, which is why Rice is a residential college. One of the things about the university is it was started as tuition free. And it's not tuition free anymore, sadly. It's a school that really makes an investment in its students. Rice University is located in Houston, and Houston is the 4th largest city in the country right now and growing. The university is only 15 minutes from downtown in the museum district, which has got about 20 museums really close to the campus. Houston is an ethnically diverse city. It's got about 145 languages that are spoken there. It's a great foodie city, and it has the world's largest medical complex, which conveniently is directly across from Rice University. Students at Rice get free access to the metro, so they can get downtown easily. And not going to lie, Houston is a car city. They don't have great public transportation, but it is helpful to be able to get downtown. And there are museums and zoos right near the campus. Texas is a red state, but Houston is blue. And Rice is a left-leaning campus, which probably comes as no surprise. Most schools are. It's a well-endowed school. It's got about an $8 billion endowment, which is terrific for the size of the school. It's an R1 institute, 300-acre campus with a lot of trees. The trees are just absolutely beautiful, oak trees all over. The architecture of the campus is really unique. It's a Mediterranean revival with kind of a Byzantine twist. And some of the buildings, I'm convinced, my own daughter applied to Rice. And I'm convinced the reason she did was because she liked Duncan Hall, which is the engineering building. And when you walk in, the ceiling of this building, it almost looks Byzantine, but apparently the architect drew it freehand and then had a very fancy projector, not like the overhead projectors, that we used to have in school, and projected it on the ceiling, and that's how they painted it. And when you do that, I guess you see all of the imperfections that you can't see with the naked eye. So there's still like eraser marks up there and things like that. And it's just incorporated into the ceiling. It is truly a beautiful thing. They have public art. They have a museum on campus, the Moody Center for the Arts, with exhibits, workshops, classes. It's open to the public. And one of the public art pieces that they have an installation called Sky Space, which is this open canopy. And twice a day at dawn and dusk, LED lights are shown on this canopy in just a spectrum of lights. It's very cool. The artist is James Terrell, and it's one of 73 sky spaces that he has around the world. Anyway, so that's setting the stage. But I tell you, this school, Lisa, a lot of schools kind of talk the talk, and Rice University walks the walk about making change. In 2021, the board announced they plan to enlarge the undergrad student body by 20%. By 2025, they should be at 4,800 students. And this is on top of a 35% increase in undergraduate enrollment from 2005 to 2013. They'll also add a 12th residential college. They have 11 right now. So by then, they'll have space for an additional 33% of their students living on campus. Their current president, Reginald DeRoche, he is a first-gen president. He's the first Black president at a university with a segregationist past. Rice was a segregated campus until the 60s. First immigrant president, he is originally from Port-au-Prince. And at Rice, he's the first engineer president. So he previously was dean of engineering at Rice. And before he came to Rice, he was chair of civil and environmental engineering at Georgia Tech. But once he got to Rice, he established the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and he has a goal of increasing the diversity of the student body, faculty, and the staff, because not students, of course, they make relationships with faculty, but a lot of times it's the staff that create those relationships. So I think you'll see him to be kind of a transformational president. Academics. So Rice University does not have a core curriculum. They have flexible distribution requirements. So students are required to take 3 humanities, 3 social science, 3 applied sciences, and 1 writing course. So they have a lot of flexibility because no one is telling them what those courses have to be. It gives them the ability to double major, really focus on an interdisciplinary education. 84% of the classes are taught by full professors. And they do have classes that are taught by students, and they can design their own courses. So you find things like the philosophy of coffee, board game theory, which both sound kind of fun. Student to faculty ratio is 6:1. Median class size is 14. Now, they do have some of their intro classes, intro to biology, things like that are going to be larger and could be 100 students. But this is one of those Rice urban legends that they will run a class even if there's one student enrolled. So, which is amazing, right? Because how often do you hear about classes having something like 1 or 3 students? 40% of their students do double major or even triple major, and Rice really focuses on them still graduating within 4 years. They have an honor code system. Most of their exams are unproctored, and they do have strong support for students. So they have academic advising, they have professionals, they also have peer academic advisors. They strong experiential programs. They call this Beyond the Hedges because Rice University, it really is a distinct campus, very enclosed feeling. It's surrounded by hedges. So when you go beyond the hedges, they've got study abroad, about 150 study abroad programs, 60 plus countries. And I think as of right now, they're on all 7 continents, including Antarctica, which probably feels good after, spending time in Houston.
Yeah, you don't want to come back.
No, right? And they have about 30% of their students going abroad. And they work hard with like their engineering students who are on a pre-professional track, like pre-med, to make sure that they can go abroad. And because of that flexible curriculum, as long as you start planning ahead of time, that shouldn't be an issue for students. I'm talking a lot, Lisa. Any questions so far?
No, I mean, I guess I just keep wondering what's the catch. There has to be a catch, right? There's got to be something bad about this place.
Well, like I said, it's Houston and it's hot down there. It's hot.
Okay. You have to deal with hot weather.
So far, it's just the weather. That's the only thing I'm coming up with.
Okay.
But we'll see. They have research is a big part of it. It's a R1 institute. 68% of their students do research. They've got 45 research centers and institutes and internships. So 90% of students are interning while they're at Rice. And because they have more than 17,000 Rice alums in Houston, they have amazing connections. And, Houston, energy is a huge industry there. The space industry, Rice has a long history with NASA and the space industry. So all kinds of connections there. The Center for Career Development hosts more than 100 employers on campus each year. The outcomes for all their majors are really high. Top industries for their graduates are internet and software tech and management consulting. The biggest employers, Microsoft, Accenture, Deloitte, Meta, and Teach for America, which probably tells you something about Rice students. The university is organized into 7 schools. There is the School of Architecture, which is one of the top ranked in the country. The Jesse H. Jones Graduate School of Management, the Brown School of Engineering, also highly ranked. School of Humanities, the Shepherd School of Music, which is very highly ranked and only accepts about 30 students per class. It is very competitive. The Weiss School of Natural Sciences, the School of Social Sciences, and the Arts and Sciences School is their largest. Academic advising there, they really help students explore their majors. They have workshops on how to manage time, executive functioning. They have academic fellows, which are student tutors that are free. Disability resources are on campus for students that need that. And their service and assistance animals are allowed everywhere on campus.
Even in class?
Even in class.
Excellent.
I know.
Little Fluffy gets an education after all.
Right? I know. I bring my support cat with me. Majors and programs. So they have 50 majors, 25 minors. You apply to the school and then you can list up to 3 majors. And they're not required to be in that particular school. Architecture and music do work a little bit differently because you will have an audition or a portfolio to submit.
So you applied directly to the school. You don't just apply to Rice University as a whole. So you have to pick one
Correct.
of those schools and apply to them. Got it.
Correct. Popular majors are biochemistry, economics, psychology, and then everything in engineering. It is a big engineering school. Unique programs. They have something, they've got medical humanities, sports management, kinesiology, which is unusual at a school of this size. And new, they have sports analytics, which is really kind of surprising. And talk about the size. I don't think I mentioned the school is about 4,400 undergrad students. So it's not a big school. It is that kind of a small mid-size. Yeah, it's really a sweet size. I like that size for most students.
Yeah, is it true that you can't major in business at Rice, right? You can only minor in it.
Correct. They have a minor in business. The business school is a graduate school. So there's some depth there in terms of faculty, but it's only a minor. Student life. And this is one of the places they really shine. So they are consistently ranked in the top 10, if not the top 5 for quality of life, happiest students, diversity, class and race interaction, LGBTQ friendliness. It is a welcoming place for nearly all students. They are divided into 11 residential colleges. And this is where we always say, just kind of like Hogwarts.
So do they take classes together within those colleges, or is it just strictly a residential and student life experience?
It is strictly a student life experience. It is, you are randomly assigned to those colleges. So it's not, we're taking all the humanities kids together and the athletes are over here. It is random. So you could be in a house with, a football player and an artist and a mechanical engineer. It truly is residential. And then once you're assigned to that house, that's where that's it. You are a part of that house for all 4 years. Even if you live off campus, you are still a part of that house. And I really like that philosophy. And I think you can build those connections. I'll say my own daughter is at University of Chicago, and you get randomly assigned to a house. But then if you move dorms,
you move houses there.
You move houses. So I don't love that. But Rice randomly assigns students to houses because they are meant to be a microcosm of the larger campus. They really want you to be exposed to everything. And that's part of their culture of care. A lot of times when we talk with families and students, you kind of suss out what kind of environment are they looking for. And parents usually are the ones who really want a collaborative environment for their students, which I totally understand. And I wanted the same thing. And Rice is a place where I think that is absolutely true. And not just in some majors. I think you will find across the board that students are supportive of one another, not just academically, but personally. Rice likes their traditions. They have a week, which is their freshman orientation that is required. Everyone comes in early, gets to know one another, gets to know the campus, goes through all kinds of orientation programs, a full understanding of what resources are available at the campus. They have a campus-wide water balloon fight. They have a Yeah, I know. Doesn't that sound fun?
For about 5 minutes, and I think you're probably not going to like it anymore. But yeah,
I
conceptually, it's fabulous.
I know. I with my aim, I would probably be drenched. So I'd probably be hiding under one of those trees. They have a bike race that apparently gets more student involvement than homecoming. So that sounds fun.
Right. And there are no frats there, right? There are no frats or no sororities because the founder, in addition to haunting the school, also did not like kind of ranking or like non-egalitarian societies. So he put the kibosh on that.
Now you said haunting. No one else has said the place is haunted.
No, I'm doing this thing.
But you are correct about the no Greek life. So no Greek life, but that's where you build your relationships are in the houses. So yes, I don't know about the haunting. Now you really got me.
See, I just want to see what happens. Like, it's sort of one of those experiments, right? Like, I just made a baseless claim and I'm just going to repeat it over and over. And before you know it, it's going to be true. Someone's going to see a ghost there, but I don't actually have any evidence, or really no one actually has any evidence of ghost being anywhere for that matter. But,
True. I don't know. That place doesn't feel like it could be haunted. Now, University of Chicago, that feels like it could be haunted.
Oh, that place is definitely haunted for sure. By many ghosts, and none of them are like happy like the Rice ghost.
Yeah, Rice does not feel that way. It's way too pretty. I can't tell you how much I love this campus. It is just beautiful, and I don't believe it. I think that their landscaping crew and their maintenance crew would not allow this to happen.
They would like root out that ghost, and
I think they called the Ghostbusters. I think this could happen. I don't believe it. I'm not buying it.
This is all my son's fault. Every time we go on a different city, he makes me go on a ghost tour with him. And I never thought about ghosts much at all until like 3 years ago. And now I'm like, oh, is that haunted? Is that haunted? Is that haunted? What about that? But in Savannah, we went on a ghost tour and all the ghosts were super nice. There was one who like owned a hotel and then he died, and he would like sit there and wanted to make sure his guests have a nice meal, so that's what I feel like. If there were a ghost, it would be like that.
Maybe, I guess. Although, can I tell you, I'm not sure I'm going on vacation with your son. I mean, not that I was invited, but
yeah, there's ghost tour. If you come to Chapel Hill in Raleigh, there's ghost tours here. We can take you during one of the evenings of SACAC. So,
all right, put that down on the itinerary.
Okay, ghost tour. Yeah, got it.
Ghost tour, got it. Let's see. So, diverse campus. They have students from 47 states. I'm not sure where the 3 holdouts are.
It's probably North Dakota and South Dakota.
And probably Wyoming.
Yeah. Or Montana.
Maybe Alaska. I don't know. Anyway, 55 countries, 300 plus student clubs. Their student newspaper, The Thresher, consistently rated high. They have the Marching Owl Band. They have a sailing club. They have rugby. They have all the clubs that you could want. And if they don't, of course, you can start your own. They have maker labs on space. They have an engineering design kitchen, digital media commons. They have because they have an architecture school, they have a student designed built place for students to hang out called The Hangout.
God, they must have spent hours on that one.
I know. I'm not sure how great the marketing department is there, but architecture is doing really well. They do have student-run businesses. So they've got a coffee house. They have Rice Bikes where you can rent buy bikes, repair bikes. Of course, they have a boba tea shop there as well. I'm still not getting the boba tea thing, but they've got it.
Yeah. No, it's an acquired taste that I guess you and I have yet to acquire. So
Yeah, it must be a generational thing.
Friends, this concludes the first part of Linda and Lisa Spotlight on Rice University. We hope you'll join us next Thursday for the final part. Friends, on Monday's episode, I will talk about the kerfuffle created by U.S. News making substantial changes to how they rank colleges and how that is reverberating throughout the college landscape. And we will continue with Lisa's interview with Eric Newble, Associate Vice President at East Carolina, and they are talking about the importance of student engagement and the correlation between student engagement and student success. And friends, remember, it's not where you go, it's not where you go, it's not where you go, but it's what you do when you get there, and it's what you do when you get out of there. If you only remember one thing about your college-bound kid, I hope you will remember that. See you on Monday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stylianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.